Hello, and welcome to another episode of Myths and Stories, a Destiny 2 lore podcast. Today, we will be covering the book Dragonslayers, not to be confused with the, I believe, 1984 video game, Dragonslayer. Two words, not one word. This one is about the Dragons of Destiny, of course, those being Ahamkaras. This is kind of we're doing the last couple episodes we did was the Eris Morn continuation and kind of like updating her story and getting her kind of her story kind of caught up to the final shape. And so we've done an Ahamkara episode in the past, and so we're kind of calling this like part three, right, Myth?
Yeah, essentially. Because we've done part one, part two, previously, I believe last year. Just kind of talking about what Ahamkara are, kind of our theorizing around them at that time, their origins, relation to the worm gods, all that fun stuff.
Yeah,
Uh, and we also talked about the Ahamkara hunts, the great hunt that happened.
that supposedly killed all of them, but like with Season of the Wish, it was like kind of like updated us to all of it, right? Like
Yeah.
we didn't exactly kill all of them.
Yeah, Season of the Wish has given us a lot more context or I guess some additional stories from that time period, uh, as well as some definitive proof that at least one other Ahamkara, other than Riven, survived the Great Hunt. Uh, and it's likely that they were not the only one. Because if one
Well,
can do it,
as well
then
as all the eggs, right?
well, yes, that's true. I don't know that we can consider the eggs like Ahamkara that survived the hunt, quote
Sure,
unquote.
sure.
Um,
I've always looked at it that way because when I again going through this season with the Wish and finding all the different eggs, I was always reminded of the corrupted eggs that we specifically went and killed and destroyed with Wish Ender throughout
yeah,
the Dreaming City. So yeah, so to see eggs that were uncorrupted, like obviously at the end of Season of the Witch when it was revealed that Savathun had just been what holding one hostage, keeping one
seemingly,
for collateral. I
yeah,
don't know why did she have one? Because that was at the somewhere in her oubliette, right?
yes, yeah,
So yeah, so like that's yeah, whatever that was about, I still am not 100% sure on. But then like week after week, we kept finding more and more and more as per Riven's request, um, and not just request as part of the bargain of a wish. Like we had to fulfill that in order for the wish that was made to be fulfilled.
hmm
So yeah, like the fact that the Great Hunt um, was not an extinction level event for the Ahamkara is kind of amazing.
yeah. Like it, they, they're very interesting beasts. They're very intelligent and cunning in some cases. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that some found a place to hide and others just left.
Yeah.
Are just like, well, if I stay here, then I'm gonna die. So bye. like,
Yeah.
and it seemed like others almost didn't care because Ahamkara still persist in some ways after their physical form has been killed.
Sure.
Um, and maybe saw it almost as the next step towards whatever they were trying to, move themselves towards.
Like enlightenment or elevation of self or something like that.
Right, something.
Sure. I could
Uh,
see that.
yeah. So, but what we're gonna be going over first here, that lore book, Dragonslayers, um, is an interesting perspective on the Great Hunt. So it is being told, I think, primarily from the point of view of Saladin or Valus Forge, as he is nowadays. Uh, and it's being used almost as a cautionary tale or a um, a story with a theme for something something to be learned from it. And he's telling these primarily to Keitel, in his role as kind of ambassador slash mentor to the the leadership of the Cabal on earthly things. And so we pick up with the very first chapter, titled appropriately Valis Forge's Prologue. And in it, we see him amongst some delegations of the Cabal, and it goes like this. We need not see these local administrations as challenges to the Empress's rule, Councillor Taran said to the assembled war council. In truth, they may be keeping the whole fleet from descending into anarchy. Well, I don't give a war beast turd if they are, sneered Valis Tarog. This is treason. We should dispatch a legion to establish order. A murmur of agreement bubbled up from the assembled Cabal commanders. Empress Keitel regarded the handful of holographic blips hanging over the council table. They represented refugees from her sundered homeworld, adrift on massive starships in deep space, the remainder of an entire civilization reduced to digital specks. And what say you, Valis Saladin? The Empress asked. We have a saying on Earth, the Iron Lord replied. There are two ways to move a war beast, with a chunk of flesh or with your fist. This situation calls for both. The assorted commanders grunted in assent. So it shall be, the Empress declared. Taran, dispatch a shipment of goods immediately, with all luxuries included. If conservation of resources is the pretext for their authority, let us remove it. Valis Tarag, she continued, you shall be my fist. Send an echelon to guard the shipment from fallen raiders. Reassert my authority in no uncertain terms. The Empress stamped her foot lightly on the ship's deck. The matter was settled. Very well. Our next item is... The counselor stopped mid-sentence, interrupted by a pleasant ringing octave that seemed to come from inside her own head. Everyone in the council perked up. They heard it too, and they turned their attention to a closed doorway. Optis Quarix, the Empress said, her voice laced with concern. Come in. The telepathic tone dissipated, and the scion entered, her lone eye unshielded by a helmet. Gradually, a series of images bloomed into the council's imagination. The Witness, a portal, Savathun, Eris Morn. The Wishing Wall, a spire, and eggs. Ahamkara, Riven. The room was gripped by tense silence. Keitel had avoided bringing up the Witness thus far because, despite their best efforts, the Cabal were helpless to breach the portal. The Empress knew that the resulting feeling of impotence made her commanders rash. They were ill-accustomed to dread. At least now they had a path forward. The Vanguard has a habit of playing with forces they cannot hope to control, Councillor Tarek muttered. The fact that we're resurrecting the Ahamkara at all is proof that they can be controlled, Saladin replied coolly. Or at least eliminated. Ah, yes, the Empress said. Your famed great hunt. If I recall the Mythkeeper Azdiat's lessons, you were integral to their extinction. Is that not so? It is, Saladin replied with reluctance. The Ahamkara were deemed too dangerous to live, so we killed them. Valis Tarag shrugged impatiently. The Cabal would have done the same. You would have tried, Saladin fired back sternly, and failed. Among the Cabal, only the Scions truly understand the Anthem Anatheme. The rest of you would have ended up in prisons of your own making. There is nothing the Cabal cannot conquer, with or without the Scions, Keitel shot back. You would do well to remember that, Lord Saladin. Saladin weighed his strategic position. Of course, Empress, he deferred. My apologies. Keitel pushed forward. Tell us some tales of these wish dragons. We would be wise to study our foe. Saladin sighed inwardly. This was not a period of history he gladly recounted. As you wish, he said. And that is the end of the first chapter.
I love it. Story time with Saladin. I'm excited. So this really is just kind of like a a war council meeting. Like they're all like trying to figure out like what's the best way to go. I have a new insult that I'm going to start using though. I don't give a war beast turd. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm taking that one and I'm keeping it. So not a whole lot to dissect here, but council's meeting, like the one thing that was interesting too was that even the Cabal have been trying to breach the portal. I didn't know that was actually a thing. I thought it was just Vanguard trying to send people through. Obviously failing horribly. I still can't get that one image from, was that Season of the Deep that we saw the first try?
I think
and
so.
The guy was like smashed against the Traveler, and it's like there's like that it's a messed up scene, man. So story time with Saladin. That apparently he's not real happy to regale.
Yeah. He's not terribly proud of this time in history, it sounds like.
I mean, to be fair, it's the genocide of an entire species. So
Right.
maybe don't like be super excited about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think we've also seen a lot of, Saladin has gone through some things since the hunt.
Oh yeah.
And there was probably a time where he maybe would have been very proud of his accomplishments in that.
Because now, and correct me if I'm wrong here, all of the Iron Lords were at one point warlords, correct?
Uh, I mean, either warlords or, Dark Age Risen at the very least. I don't know that they all, became warlords of their own area. Some
Okay.
of them certainly, but I think there's at least a few that just, they woke up and the Iron Lords were already a thing and they were absorbed into their ranks kind of thing.
Okay, gotcha. I remember several of them, like when we did our series with Rasputin and the Iron Lords and all that stuff. I remember like we talked a little bit about there, and for some reason I remember a few of them were warlords that the Iron Lords had like come through and were like, "We're conquering you," and they're like, "Oh, I can't be conquered," and then they got conquered, and they're like, oh, "Okay, I guess I'm an Iron Lord now."
Yeah, I think the general um, method was to try not to resort to final deaths of other Risen.
Right.
And
Yep.
it was a like, hey, we are a group that is large enough and powerful enough to deal with you violently if we have to. This is your chance to not make us do that. Uh, and I believe the one that you're probably thinking of was Fellwinter, who
Yep.
went, I forget what the warlord was that he went to go meet, and he very quickly established for himself, like he very quickly judged that this was not a person that was ever going to in his eyes be reformed
Sure.
to someone that would have the best interest of others in their mind. And so
Like this guy was a dictator and that's all he'll ever be.
right, so Fellwinter enacted a very final judgment.
Yep.
Uh Even though that kind of went against what he should have done.
We'll just say it was frowned upon.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Heavily discouraged.
There you go.
uh but yeah, so we get into some of Saladin's stories from this time. Uh the first of which is titled The Iron Lord's Tale. And this one goes like this. Lord Timur wades forward into the shallow pool that rings the islet, listening attentively to the rhythmic lapping of the water. There is a gentle artifice at work here. Each step he takes, however clumsy, stirs a repeating, too perfect echo of the same small noise, a recording or an isolated memory, a mimetic transmission cued to overwrite every other sound in the vicinity. He wonders if the last poor villager to come this way wished for peace and quiet. The sound starts again, and Timur turns. The Ahamkara lunges at him from the side. Its glistening bulk emerged from a span of water too shallow to have ever contained it. Through a shower of black-green liquid, Timur sees its wedge-shaped maw split open like a flower. Into all that displaced pond water, Timur summons void. A row of cativation bubbles burst along the underside of the Ahamkara in a cascading shockwave of pale violet fire. It unseams the Ahamkara at the joints, and Timur's lungs nearly cave in. What's left of the Ahamkara crawls to the edge of the islet, panting raggedly. Timur bends to slap once, experimentally, at the surface of the lake. He hears the alarm call of a bird from deeper in the trees. And closer by, he hears Lord Kolovance call his name. Timur wades closer to the Ahamkara. Don't you want to know if you're right? The dragon snickers, even as it dies. Don't you want to ask me about Clovis Bray? Don't you want to know? He resents the question. I know I'm right, Timur says. But he does want to know. He wants to ask, and badly. He wants, during the entire time he waits for the creature to expire. And by the end, he has to bite down on his own tongue. He is seated on the bank, tipping sludge out of his boots when Lord Kolovance catches up with him. I called to you, Lord Kolovance says. His student sounds equal part apologetic and sullen. Perhaps he wanted to fell the beast himself. I know, Lord Timur replies. I had it handled. He lets fondness warm his tone. He'll let Kolovance tell the village that their great beast has been slain, and bask in the gratitude that follows. Timur's mind is elsewhere. There's so much more important work to return to, a future to construct. Let Nirwin and her ilk obsess over their beasteries. Did you talk to it? Lord Kolovance asks. It mentioned Clovis Bray. Timur doesn't say. The taste of copper fills his mouth. No. And they walk back in silence. And that's the end of that one.
Ooh. It knows about Clovis Bray. I feel like Ahamkara know about like everything. Like I don't feel like there's anything that Ahamkara don't know about. I mean, they're paracausal entities that have been around from what I think we've discussed, the beginning of the universe.
Right.
So it doesn't fully surprise me that the Ahamkara like knows about Clovis Bray. Like there's no reason to suspect that they weren't here during the Golden Age. But I don't know. It's kind of I mean, it's an Ahamkara. It's gonna feed off of whatever it can feed off of.
Right. Well,
So
and
yeah, for it to try to
who's to say if they really know, or if they're
right, they could feed him a
just
line of bullshit and he wouldn't
right.
even know one way or another. Like it's an answer for the sake of an answer. Like, and of course, yeah, Ahamkara is gonna weave it just enough to where the Timur would want more to continue feeding. Like, yeah, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah. It is interesting though, knowing that. Going back to that Fellwinter episode, Fellwinter and Timur meet. Like
yep,
they travel together for a little bit. And to see that, like, all right, he already had this want for information about Braytech. And he didn't make a verbal wish maybe, but he very much wanted.
yeah.
And maybe that was enough. Maybe that's what steered him into the path of meeting Fellwinter, and maybe related, steered the Iron Lords into the path of Siva.
I'm telling you, the whole world runs off of goddamn Ahamkara wishes. It's ridiculous.
You know, never know.
But it's not like that's what I'm saying. Like you never know. Like it's not out of the realm of possibility to say like, oh yeah, like that's the whole reason why the Iron Lords fell was because of this one little want of knowledge, and yeah,
Yeah,
because like at the time I don't think they fully understand how Ahamkara's worked. So like even him just standing there wanting, that's a desire. That's happening. That's and even after the thing is dead, they still don't fully know that like it can still do
right,
stuff while dead. So yeah, it's
right. We don't know how much information they're acting on at this time. Or like if they thought it had to be spoken, if they knew that the bones held power after death. Like, it's dangerous to be in the presence of an
right.
Ahamkara in general.
Yep,
Like, it's kind of a no-win situation, it seems.
it really is.
But no, so that then brings us to the next story, which is titled The Hermit's Tale. Now, this one is interesting. So, it is about a guardian by the name of Albius. And the reason Albius is interesting is because of a out of an in-game but does not exist in a lore book way. It's like a book that's only ever referenced by title in game, called The Five Lives of Albius. And it is about a warlock who only ever had 5 resurrections as a guardian. Uh, and
Like he was that good, or like
um unclear.
okay. It's one thing to be like, hey, I've only been res 5 times, but it's another thing for like a new guy, like day one, be like, yeah, I've only been res 5 times today.
Yeah. So it seems like he had some significance in the Destiny universe in general, but we don't have a lore book about him. We don't even have a lore entry about him outside of this one. It's
Okay.
mostly just like flavor text off of weapons and armor and things. So he's a bit of a mysterious figure. And
Would
the
you go as far to say that he might be a hermit?
right?
Because that's the name of the book.
That's the name of the
Got it.
book.
Got it.
So some interesting things that we know about Albius, just based on some of those descriptions and such. So we know that according to the 5 Lives of Albius, this book, that Albius the Warlock ventured into a swamp on Venus, carrying only a single lantern during his 4th life. And that's from the Lantern Bond from the Taken King. During his time in the swamp, he lived beneath the shade of a willow tree, because the swamp had consumed everything else there was outside of this tree. So maybe that's where the hermit comes from. He lived in a swamp under a tree. That is very hermit-like behavior.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
In his 5th and final life, the Ahamkara called Tyrannus spoke to Albius. But by then, Albius wished for nothing, and so Tyrannus could not help him. That comes to us from the Silicin Fen item, also from the Taken King, as well as the Gifts and Bargains book that we're going to read probably as part of next episode for the Ahamkara.
Tyrannus being Riven's lover, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Make sure I got all the names right.
Yep. So he lived in this swamp during his 4th life. Sometime after being a hermit in the swamp and he died, was resurrected again, so his 5th life. He met Tyrannus, but legitimately didn't have anything he wanted. And so Tyrannus couldn't grant any wishes. At some point after that, Albius died fighting a final stand of some sort, and the warlocks crafted a bond called the 5 Lives of Albius to honor him. And that final stand information comes from that bond, the 5 Lives of Albius, and that bond was sold all the way back in D1 by the Speaker. It was one of the legendary class items you could get as a warlock.
Interesting.
His funeral was subsequently held on Io, due to the moon being sacred to warlocks. And among those who attended the funeral were Cade 6 and Banshee 44, who became bored during the long ceremony and made a bet that resulted in Cade breaking his legs by jumping off the mesa during the funeral. And that information comes to us from one of Cade's treasure maps in Destiny 2. Back when I believe that was like at Forsaken launch, that those were a thing. So we just
that might have been all the way back at D2 Vanilla.
Maybe I don't remember exactly when his treasure maps came up.
Yeah, it had to have been because Forsaken would have been where he died, and he wouldn't have been able to give out treasure maps.
Oh, because they were sold by him. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. No, you're right. But so
some part of my squirrel brain still works.
Yeah. So we know kind of the tail end of the life of this warlock, Albius. The fact that he lived 5 lives, he was a hermit for his 4th, he couldn't feed Ahamkara on his 5th, and died in a blaze of glory, and was respected enough that Cade and Banshee, as well as presumably many others, went to his funeral. So, I tell you all of that to now tell you this chapter, The Hermit's Tale, because it is all about the mystery of who this Albius was. And it goes like this. Warlocks debate. Hunters gossip. Titans share mission-critical information. Warlocks deliberate over whether Albius's first life came before or after his resurrection in the light. Did he have 5 lives, or technically 6? Was he awoken, bringing to his total to 7? Was he exo with an uncountable tally before his rebirth in the light? What was the role of his ghost in his lives and deaths? Of the Ahamkara he dealt with? These are the questions heard in hushed voices in the tower's study halls, and louder on its practice fields. The hunters talk over the relics of his lives. Where is his lantern now? On blessed Io with his memorial? Sunk into a Venusian swamp? Secured in a treasure cache? At least 6 hunters have come forward with claims to the lantern's location. None have been authenticated by Albius's surviving acquaintances. The Titans honor his loss as any other diminishment in light. But to those who still remember the great hunt, his lives are a warning. Did Albius make an unwary bargain? Was his light eaten by a wish dragon? Is that Ahamkara still alive? Still hunting for light bearers? These are the questions Albius and his ghost are no longer able to answer. Those who wear the sign of the lantern bear it in honor of a warlock whose lives touched the light, and as an unfading reminder of the vigilance still required of them. And that's all for that little chapter about Albius.
Well, that's just a bunch of questions.
That's all we have from this guy.
God damn it.
It's like,
all right.
It's truly all we have about this Albius character is just these kind of mysterious breadcrumb things.
So I have a set of questions then. One, this is still Saladin telling this story, right?
Yes, supposedly
or telling this entry at least.
Yeah.
To the War Council. What's the? Do you know of the connection there? Is there a connection there?
Unclear. There is no listed connection between like it doesn't state anywhere that I'm aware of that like Albius met Saladin.
Sure.
But it seems we know he met Tyrannus, he met Ahamkara, and it seems like he, based on this entry, was present during the Great Hunt.
Sure.
So perhaps his misbegotten wish was to never be understood, or to be to be a part of the greatest mystery in Destiny, or something along those lines.
Sure.
What's interesting, like all things, is that Albius, the name, is has some potential root meanings.
It's not Grecian, is it?
Well, no, not directly anyway. But it may come from the Latin root of albus, which means white, which in turn inspired words like Albion, the land of Camelot and all that.
Sure.
So perhaps this is a nod to like the myths of like Merlin and that kind of thing.
Oh, sure. I feel like if Merlin were to be rezzed, I think he would be a warlock.
Right. No, it just makes sense.
It just makes sense, right? There's no way he's a Titan or a hunter. He's too smart for that. No offense, Titans and hunters, but he's too smart for that.
Well, and it fits his whole theme, right? Magical wielder, keeper of dangerous knowledge. Depending on your mythos, the son of Satan. Like there's a whole lot of warlocky things that could be attributed to him. I'm not terribly up to date on my Arthurian stories, so I don't know if there's more connections between the Albius of Destiny and Merlin or something else in that world. But
I guess Merlin was kind of a hermit, right?
I mean, I think so. Yeah,
In my head, he was a bit of a hermit.
right. And I don't know if that's just me like remembering the more theatrical takes on
Yeah,
him versus like what the actual original stories were.
right.
Um,
That's kind of what my brain's doing right now too.
but yeah, so just kind of a fun one and another one of those mysteries of like, I wonder if we're ever gonna actually learn more about this Albius guy.
Maybe.
Uh, but yeah, so the next chapter here is titled "The Bone Trader's Tale," and this one goes like this. They tracked the Ahamkara to the gutted remnants of an outpost, through vegetation so thick they had to abandon their sparrows and continue on foot. It was House of Winter territory, and caution slowed their final approach to a near crawl. Rook could read Van de Van's growing frustration, the rigid line of his armored shoulders, but neither of them were willing to risk their ghosts long enough to get a full scan of the area. The Ahamkara was waiting for them at the center of a ring of moss-covered ruins, as if they'd arranged a formal meeting. It was smaller than Rook had expected, no larger than a jump ship. The creature stood unmoving in the open, spine curled into a dramatic bend, jaws agape. It looked as if it was smiling, more like a comical, preserved specimen from a warlock's study than a living thing. Rook opened her mouth to ask if this was normal, and then Vaughn raised his rifle and fired in the same smooth movement, so abruptly that Rook flinched, and the Ahamkara dropped to the dirt. Its serpentine coils roiled on the, under the paroxysms of agony, the great beast flopping over itself in the dust. But all the while, it still smiled, that toothy smile, its eyes gleaming. Finally, Vaughn strode forward with a blade and casually cleaved the thing's head from its neck. The Ahamkara's flesh began to fray and deform as if it had been an ephemeral substance, and within a minute there was nothing left but bones. Rook kept a hand on her cannon, expecting the creature to leap to its skeletal feet for an encore, but the sizzling hiss diminished, and the bones lay still. Not much of a hunt, Rook said in the resulting silence. Every other light bearer in the city had a dragon hunting story these days, true or otherwise. None of them went like this. Vaughn knelt in front of the skull. Make something up? Rook watched him, bemused, until the Titan took his sword and turned it over in his hands, using the hilt to hammer a few teeth loose. I thought wish dragons were supposed to be powerful. What if the Fallen could wish for our extinction? Vaughn said, turning over the smallest of the fangs in his fingers. That's the kind of power we're talking about. Rook looked up at the ruins around them. I wonder why no one on our side has tried that yet. Vaughn shrugged. Maybe they didn't do it right. Maybe the world where we win is too different from this one, and they left us behind. The thought made Rook uneasy. A lot of would-be dragon hunters were missing, vanished, as if they'd never existed. She thought of those light bearers, scattered across 100 reflections of the same clearing, 100 impossible wishes. The Ahamkara were dwindling. What if humanity's last ticket off a doomed world was going with them? We should get some bones back to the warlocks, Rook said. Vaughn laughed. He slipped the teeth into the ammunition pockets on his bandolier. Help me gather up the rest of this. And that's the end of that chapter.
Ooh, is he going to do some shady dealings with a certain merchandiser that we know of? I feel like he would.
Maybe so. I'm not sure what the prevalence of the spider is at this time. But I wouldn't be surprised if he already had a bit of a black market going.
As I'm saying, it's Spider. Like he's yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I imagine this is like a snake, like they came across a snake that was just like
Yeah.
chilling there, and then they just like pop slap and it's done. Like it's like that's it. It feels very. I guess not all Ahamkara were. I don't want to say smart, but cunning enough to like draw out a battle or something like that. I guess not all of them had fully realized their. And I guess that's the interesting thing too. The question there: what if the fallen could wish for our extinction? And it's like I wonder why nobody on our side has wished for that. Why didn't we just wish for the fallen to be extinct? Right? Like all these problems that are coming to the soul system. Why didn't somebody just be like, man, I wish there were no more fallen. Like, granted, we know that the Ahamkara wishes are not that simple and straightforward.
Right.
So, like, yeah, it's this is
Well,
a very interesting story here.
to be fair, the Fallen kind of are now.
Oh shit!
Like, if you think about it, though, like,
Their wishes aren't instantaneous poofs.
right, like, we decimated
We
all
really
of the
did.
houses. Like, by narratively speaking, by the lore, outside of the House of Light, like, the
They're
Fallen are
gone.
just
They are
disparate
gone.
little pockets of survivors at this point.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
essentially what humanity was at the collapse.
yeah, yeah,
Like they're huddled in little like trees and huts, and there's like a few 5 or 6 of them together, and they're like, I pray to God we don't come across guardians, because if we do, we're all dead. Like
yeah.
that was kind of the humanity's thought pattern while the fallen were raiding the soul system at the collapse. So yeah, it's yeah.
It,
My how the turntables, right?
it's kind of wild to think we, the Guardians in particular, have done more extinction level damage to the Elixni than the
I'm
Whirlwind did.
I'm telling you, man. A lot of our stuff had a lot of our armor have skulls on it. We might be the bad guys.
Now, not to say
Not
that the
not
Fallen
just
didn't
not just
instigate, but
That's true. That's true. But like we don't even have like it's not even like symbols of skulls. Like we have literal skulls on some of our armor. Like
hmm
we might actually be the bad guys. Remember, light and dark they're not inherently good or bad. They're just tools.
yeah,
And everyone's good from a certain point of view and everyone's bad from a certain point of view. So, yeah.
yeah. So it's an interesting thought. They're like, what if? Why haven't we done this? Maybe someone did, and
Maybe
this is
someone
the
did.
result.
And this is how
Uh,
long it took to come to fruition.
Now, the other thing that's interesting though is there are light bearers, dragon hunters during this time that have just poofed out of existence.
Sure.
And they know they existed, so it's not necessarily a case with Pradith where it's like you literally are erased from time.
Yeah.
Uh but it is an interesting thought of like, did they all just die to the Ahamkara, or
Did they escape with them?
did
Did they go somewhere?
right, like, or did they wish themselves into a different reality, a different dimension,
Sure.
a place that isn't here?
Well, like what they said, like 1,000 light bearers scattered across 1,000 reflections of the same clearing with 1,000 different wishes happening all at once,
Right?
spawning a thousand different realities. Like, yeah, it's yeah,
Yeah. And if we think way, way back, during our I think our Light and Dark series is where we talked about it. Or perhaps I think it was there. That there was a lore entry about a ghost and the theorizing of how ghosts resurrected us.
Oh yeah, they just
And
pick another timeline where we
yeah,
didn't die.
the theory of like find a timeline that we're still alive in and then use that timeline's person as a blueprint to rebuild them in this time.
Yeah,
So
I remember
if
that entry, and I
yeah,
can't remember what it's from.
I don't remember the exact like lore card it came from, but if we presume that to be true, which I'm still up in the air if it is or not, but if we presume that to be true, then that means that there is a multiverse going on
Yeah,
of just different branching timelines within Destiny, and maybe the Ahamkara can just bump someone to the next timeline over, or who knows?
I like it.
Yeah. So
Well, in that same the whole idea of multiversing too, um, isn't I swear that that's how Petra described going to the ascendant plane. It's like there's different layers, like a stack of coins, right? Like
yeah, I think that's a little different. So I similar but different.
okay,
I see that as like you're traveling to a different plane of existence within the same timeline.
okay, sure.
So
The way the
there's
ghost resurrection is happening, or the way that the ghost resurrection was being described, was it's literally looking through all the various timelines of like, hey,
right.
I was standing in this exact position and I got shot and I died. Well, what if there's a timeline where I was standing 4 inches to the left and now I didn't get shot and I didn't die? Okay, well that's the one that's going to come back.
Yeah.
Like as far as like a point, it's using that as like a point of reference to be like, I'm just gonna bring that one forward, and that's the whole idea behind the paracausality of why we just keep getting rezzed.
Yeah. So, neither here nor there, but it is an interesting idea that kind of corresponds with what Rook and Vaughn are talking about here. But yeah. So, next chapter here is going to have some names that we are very familiar with. Um, this one is titled The Wise Woman's Tale. And it goes like this. A moment, Eris called, and Wei Ning left her side to doubtlessly join some other fray. The Ahamkara carcass lay on its side, dead at last. Eris felt her fingertips itch with the arc energy she had channeled a moment ago. She tensed, stretched, caught her breath. It was early morning. The sun had just begun to edge over the horizon. She walked around the beast, surveying the damage they had done. They had caught it unawares, trapped it, blinded it, felled it. Eris stopped when she saw the yawning chasm in its belly. Wei Ning had made this fatal cut. Viscera had spilled out and steamed in the fresh morning light. A rib jutted from the wound, white and gleaming. Eris unsheathed her sword. She could have a trophy. Just this. Hadn't Shax dragged a skull twice his size back to the city? She laid the blade's edge against the creature's rib. The bone chipped her sword and took its due before releasing a sliver of the Ahamkara's remains. A piece of bone lay at her feet. When Eris picked it up, her vision tunneled, and she heard whispers. The bone was wet and raw and shiny. She held it between her thumb and forefinger and smiled. And that's the end of that chapter.
Oh, Eris, You know not of what you do. You, oh, Eris.
Yeah. So if there was ever a doubt, I'm pretty sure we
Oh yeah,
conclusively elsewhere saw that Eris had an Ahamkara bone, but
oh yeah.
this now undeniably proves it and tells us where it came from. It came from the
That
Great Hunt.
that rock in her little green bubble
Yep.
that's an Ahamkara bone. Yeah.
Yep. That's this Ahamkara bone.
Though I do like her justification. She's like, yeah, I'll take a trophy. I mean, hell, Shaq's dragged a whole freaking skull. Like, who even
Yeah.
cares? Like,
Yeah. And I think going back to Shax and talking about his conflicts with the Ahamkara during the hunts, and especially his dialogue from the Warlord's Ruin dungeon that we talked about in that episode. But he tells that Ahamkara after he kills them. You know, he's like, I wonder if the reason they send me to do this is because I do not wish to do this.
oh
Uh,
sure,
and
because he can't. It's they couldn't feed off of Shaq's anyway.
right, like Shax doesn't see this as a thing for glory. He doesn't see the hunts as a like fun excursion. He sees it as a necessary but ultimately terrible extermination.
Sure. Well, that's I mean that's exactly what they are. Like
Right.
as much as it's sad to think of, the decimation and genocide of a species. uh, this a paracausal species that can just willy nilly make shit happen, um, is quite dangerous. Like that's I mean again it's the the fact that those wishes are I mean it's anything. It's whatever. I don't even think they have to fall within the realm of physicality, right? Like they don't have to. It doesn't even have to
No.
follow our laws of physics. In it's a wish. You do whatever you want with it. I mean, as simple as wishing like I wish gravity didn't exist, or like, I wish time ran backwards. Like I mean, what there is an impossibility with the number of things that could be wished for, and that is a dangerous thing. So yeah, it's sad to think of that it was a necessary thing to happen, the great hunts, but it really truly was, because again, 100,000 guardians running through making wishes willy nilly is not a
Not
good
good.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could wishes wishes could do anything. You could undo final deaths.
Potentially, though, again, like you never come out the winner in an
Right.
Ahamkara wish. Like so you could probably be like, I wish for this person to come back alive. And Ahamkara could probably do that, but it would be in their traditional fashion. It would be they're now like they come back to life, but they've lost all their memories again, or they come back to life, but it's like they're a zombie, they're undead now instead of
Yeah.
how the person envisioned them coming back.
Or they
uh
come back as a light bearer and they have no memories.
right, like it I'm sure they would find a way. That would be such an easy one for people to want, and such an
Right.
easy one for them to twist, that like I'm kind of surprised we don't have stories about those kinds of events happening
Sure.
somewhere.
Sure. Especially for like the Halloween events, right? Like
Right.
and I'm sure Glint would have something to say. Glint and Ida would have something to say about that. That like maybe some of these headless ones are the the the
Hey,
amalgamations of failed wishes from Ahamkara.
you never know. Never know. If Io ever comes back, I can see that being a reason why there's headless ones there. Uh, or Venus.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah. So all right. So uh, looking like it's probably going to be a little bit of a shorter episode this time around because we are moving on to our final chapter. It is a longer chapter than the others, but I I know there's the other lore book, Gifts and Bargains, but really want to have that be its own self-contained thing rather than split it up.
Those are some long entries in the other one too. Those are
Yeah, that will be a
Tho-
much meatier episode.
yeah.
But so just to preface, so people know, but we're gonna move on to the final chapter in this lore book, which is titled Valis Forge's Epilogue. And we're returning once more to Saladin and the Cabal, uh, to kind of see what they all get from his stories. And it goes like this. As Saladin finished his final tale, he shook his head regretfully. He had been foolish to think that the Wish Dragons were gone for good. If the past had taught him anything, it was that all things repeat in time. Empress Keitel broke the War Council's contemplative silence. Valis Forge, you said that among the Cabal, only the Scions could truly understand these dragons. As much as anyone can, Saladin replied. Then Optus Corix shall give her opinion on the matter, she declared. All eyes turned to the slight scion sitting motionless at the edge of the room. The Optus stood, her head barely clearing the tabletop. The Y-shaped pupil of her eye dilated, and the palpitating of her milky facial skin slowed. Within the minds of the council members, the room seemed to dim and warm, and a pleasant hum began to emanate from the walls. After a relaxing moment, a series of images surfaced into their minds. A Cabal fleet, Ahamkara, shackles, a scion officer, a mindscape, a goblet, a god thought, Oxa. The shackles break, a new Torbottle, and a scion throne. The vision faded, and the cold steel of Keitel's flagship closed in around them once more. Valis Turag stood up boldly. This traitor openly imagines herself on the throne, he bellowed. We should. His screed was interrupted by a spike of psychic feedback, like a momentary migraine, and everyone was immediately slammed into another vision sequence. The Cabal fleet, Ahamkara, shackles, Valis Tarag, a bargain, Mars, with hive corpses burning, fallen corpses floating in space, human corpses buried in rubble, Cabal corpses hanging. Emperor Tarag. Tarag sagged back into his seat, stunned. The Optus struggled back to her chair and placed a small piece of moist cloth over her exposed eye. Empress Keitel swallowed hard, as if fighting back nausea. Your point is made, Optus. And what point is that exactly? Asked Tarak, his hand on his forehead. That we're all traitors in waiting? Exactly, Saladin calmly replied. It doesn't matter who wishes for what, or how well-meaning they are. Optus Corix understands that the Ahamkara feed off unintended consequences. That's why we started the Great Hunt in the first place. It wasn't that we couldn't trust the Ahamkara. It's that we couldn't trust ourselves. You are not Cabal, Tarak fired back. Empress Keitel held up her massive hand for silence. The Optus's vision remind me of the former Evoket General Umanarath, who thought she could control hive magic to our benefit, and it cost us our home world. Let us not fall into the same trap again. We will not attempt to capture the Ahamkara alive. Keitel stamped her foot on the ship's deck. It was decreed. Unfortunately, she continued, we must also protect ourselves from those who lack our forbearance. Once the witness is dealt with, the Ahamkara should return to extinction. If there is to be another great hunt, the Cabal will support it. She stamped her foot on the floor once again before standing up. The council was adjourned. As the rest of the commanders filed out, Keitel paused near Vallis Forge. I know you regret the harshness of the Great Hunt, and long for another solution, the Emperor said. But even with the benefit of hindsight, do you see another way? Saladin shook his head in resignation. If the past had taught him anything, it was that all things repeat in time. And that's the end of that chapter and the Dragonslayers lore book.
I feel like that saying is like it's really similar to the whole reason why we study history. Like, if you don't study history, you're doomed to repeat it, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's. I do like a few things in this last entry here. The two visions that are shown, like, if Ahamkara are allowed to live, it could lead to a scion ruling over Tor Bottle, and then of course that obviously pissed off, Thar. You're so much better at pronouncing these. I can't. I can't keep up with Cabal names. Pisses off this other guy, and so then like the Scion's like, okay, well, you want to see a better thing? If you do, here's another vision, and then it shows him as emperor, and it's like, oh, well, shit. With you as emperor, everyone dies. Hive, fallen, human, Cabal, literally nobody lives. Like, okay, well, that's not cool. All right, what else? So it's I like I like that Saladin is able to call it out and say, yeah, this guy understands that the Ahamkara feed off of the unintended consequences, the space that is between what is and what is desired, right? Like that's their whole feeding space.
Yep.
And so like the Ahamkara want that unknown to happen, so that way when it does inevitably drive whoever wished for it insane or like make them regret, they go on wishing again, so that way the Ahamkara can feed again. So and then of course that last part that Saladin says, it wasn't that we couldn't trust the Ahamkara, it's that we couldn't trust ourselves. Like it's nobody can out Ahamkara and Ahamkara, maybe except for Savathun. Savathun might be the one thing, and I guess Mara did kind of out Ahamkara and Ahamkara. I mean, that was the whole reason why she and Riven were allowed to, were like
right.
like that's why they got together so well. But only because like she very much like her everything she thought she knew, even though obviously she couldn't have known that what she was thinking or what she was enacting was going to happen, but she felt it so strongly that there was no space between what is and what is desired, or what, like she, all of her plans that Mara enacted, she knew were going to come to a certain fruition, and were going to happen a certain way. So she just kept like that level of confidence is, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little jealous of that. Because it wasn't like a cockiness. It was just like she truly believed that that's how events were going to transpire, and and when they did, she was like, "See, I told you so." So yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to think, kind of what the what Rook thought in that original telling, and now what is being kind of repeated here with these visions of like you never know what someone else is going to wish for, and
Right.
that could be detrimental, if not deadly, to you or the people around you. So it's better to not let anyone be able to wish anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh
Like take away the temptation because the end result is just that devastating or
right.
could be that devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, a bit of a shorter episode this week. Which I'm okay with because, like I said, the next one that we're going to do is the other book that came with the season of the Wish, and that one's that there's some those are some big entries. That's gonna Myth may have to take breaks in the middle of readings. They're beefy. They're beefy entries, but I'm excited to get to that one too. So
Yeah, absolutely. But
yeah.
but
All
yeah.
right. Well, shout outs.
Yeah, so we have one shout out for this episode. Comes to us from Apple Podcasts. Someone left a review for us there, a very kind 5 stars. So thank you for that. Um, this is from username Dio Herdown. And they say, "This is my first review ever, but I had to leave one just to explain how good you guys are. You often help me catch up with lore or information I forgot about and didn't catch the first time. So thank you for that." Uh, they have a question in here as well. Says, I have a question about the glaive Winterbite. I read the lore recently and it occurred to me, what if the glaive was a subjugator's stasis glaive and that the thing that attacked the ship in the lore was a subjugator? Anyway, keep it up and much love.
So
So,
this question caused me some confusion too because I was trying to remember what the hell a subjugator was.
yeah. So, there's a couple of pieces here that I want to touch on with this particular question. So for those that maybe don't remember, because it doesn't get used all that much in the meta, Winterbite is a heavy stasis glaive that dropped with Lightfall. And the lore card around it, for the most part, is that it was stabbed into the side of the Exodus ship that eventually made landfall at what became Neomuna. Uh, Now, I don't believe that this is a subjugator's weapon. Subjugators being the new enemy type that was teased for Final Shape. And I believe they were shown to be wielding stasis glaives or stasis sickles, essentially.
And Strand.
And Strand, yes. Yep. Um, so the confusion here that happened when we were talking about this before we started recording. Subjugators are the new enemy type, dropping with final shape. Tormentors are the current enemy type that have some pretty some physical similarities, and the names are confusingly similar. So there was a little bit of like, which one was which again?
Yeah.
Um,
Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
yeah, yeah. So, admittedly, we don't know much about subjugators and like the details surrounding them. However, we do know that tormentors are specifically described as a product of a combination of Nezarec's kind of power and I would almost say like genetics, like genetic
Yeah.
material.
I mean they're
And
physically similar to Nezarec.
right. So they're a combination of those bits of Nezarec and Callus's technology and like cloning technology. And by nature of them being a combination of those two, they didn't exist until just before Lightfall. is
Didn't
my
exist in the
interpretation.
entire universe.
Right. Like they were created just before Lightfall. Like in
Yep.
universe, they were created just before Lightfall. Given that the Winterbite glaive was stabbed into the Neomuna ship, the Exodus ship, that brought Maya Sundaresh and Chioma Essie and all of them down to Neptune. I Timeline wise, it couldn't have been a tormentor. And we don't know for sure, but I'm assuming the subjugators are kind of an evolved form of the tormentors. And if that's
That's
the
what I'm
case,
thinking too.
then it doesn't make sense for it to have been a subjugator either.
Right. Because tormentors didn't exist until recently. If we're going under the assumption that subjugators are the evolved version of that, then subjugators couldn't have existed back then. The interesting thing to note as well that I had completely forgotten about: glaives are all tools of disciples.
Yes.
So presumably, it could have been another disciple that was in the soul system. It could have even been Nezarek's glaive.
Possibly.
Like Nezarek
Yeah.
had another glaive. Um, that was the one that Eris found, correct?
Yeah. So, yeah, we know that Eris did find a glaive. The Nezarek's Whisper is the name of it. It is an arc glaive. That was discovered during Season of the Haunted, is when that item came about in its description of Eris finding it.
And we have Rook's glaive as a
Yep.
craftable weapon from the raid.
Yep. So we know, and that Rulk is kind of the origin of glaives. They all came from. They were originally a weapon on Rulk's homeworld, which he, is the only surviving member of, and he brought those. He brought the glaive with him, and presumably gifted Nezarek his glaive. And
Because
I
is
don't know
Rook
if
the first
I've.
disciple?
I believe so. Yes.
For some reason, I remember that being his title, like
Yeah.
Rook, the first disciple.
Yes, I believe that is the case, and all other disciples kind of followed after him,
Right.
and he mentored slash trained them in a way.
And we're a few again a few more kind of points to hit on for disciples. Supposedly, disciples are the last of their species,
I don't
right?
know if
Is
that's
that a
stated anywhere. I think that's
okay?
just been inferred.
Okay,
Uh,
maybe
and
that's where I was thinking of it too.
yeah, I don't know if that. I don't believe that's stated anywhere. I think it's just people have been like, all right, well, Rulk is a disciple. He's the last of his species, and Rulk created uh, another disciple, essentially brainwashed.
Right, like tapped into his mind and was like,
Yeah.
"Kill your family,"
Uh,
and the guy was like, "Kill my family? I can't do that." And they're like, "No, it's fine. Kill your old people."
yeah. So
I can't remember the name of
he
the one though. It's
I
like
know
Tao or something like that.
I'm trying to dig through it here, and I'm not finding it, but essentially Rulk assisted in the destruction of another planet, and the last surviving member of that planet eventually became a disciple as well. So I
Yep.
think that's where the idea came from, but I don't believe it's stated anywhere as a requirement to be a
Sure. It's not
disciple.
like an explicit rule to be like, to be a disciple, you have to be the last of your kind. Because
Right.
Savathun was being groomed as a disciple, and clearly she is
Exactly.
not the last of her time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I got you. I'm following now.
So uh, lots of uncertainty there as far as disciples go.
But now, is it a stated rule that all disciples have a glaive?
Again, not necessarily, but the ones we know of so far have had one.
Okay.
That being Rulk, we know that one was created for Nezarek, obviously. Um, I don't remember if one was made for. I think it was Un.
Is that what it was? Was it Un or Tao? For some reason, Tao is sticking in my head.
I don't
I
remember.
can't. I can't remember that one's name. That's driving me nuts now. Anyway.
So
But we don't have like a Oon's lantern or something like that
right,
as
we don't have a
as an in-game weapon or
named
something. Yeah,
item or
yeah,
anything
yep.
for it. But it's presumed that like glaives originated from Rulk. The only place a glaive would have come from during the original collapse, where at the time frame this happened, would have been either Rulk designed it or it was a branch of his designs.
So again, hitting it with two kind of points of logic. One, it was a glaive that hit the ship during the collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Two, it's stasis.
Right.
Like we know that stasis has actually been around possibly longer than um, we the Guardians have been using it because like even the and there's a few lore entries involving Awoken in the Dreaming City, and one of them is like they spoke the word of stasis, and
Yeah.
we don't have any context if that was like they were using stasis or if that was just like that was their code word at the time was stasis, and that code word like triggered a set of traps or whatever that was happening in that lore entry.
Right.
But yeah, so the fact that it is a stasis glaive that is hitting a downed or hitting an Exodus ship, which is what I believe caused it to actually crash in. Well, I say crash, caused them to like retreat into Neomuna and like they had to land to deal with this thing. Like that.
Yeah, it was certainly part like they were under attack, and that was part
Yep.
of the attack essentially.
Yep. So like I at the end of the day, I don't. It could have been a subjugators, but I'm like 70-30. Like I'm 30%. It could have been a subjugator with a caveat of like if subjugators were their own um, species outside of tormentors.
Right.
But I'm leaning more towards that glaive was a disciples glaive, and that subjugators are a evolution of tormentors.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. So, but that also means that there's a maybe unknown uh disciple that was at the collapse, and
Yeah.
they lost their glaive in the stabbing of the ship. Um, so yeah, but appreciate the question. Before we move on, the thought of or the talking about Rulk and whatnot, uh, got me thinking, and it formed a little bit of a pet theory on the subjugators.
Okay.
So we know that, like we said, the tormentors are a combination of Nezarec kind of DNA and callus technology. Uh, and they're called tormentors. Nezarec is kind of a god of nightmare known for tormenting his victims in various
Yep.
ways. Subjugators, in a similar fashion, Rulk, one of his titles is the Subjugator.
Oh
So
shit.
perhaps
They may be. Oh, you
subjugators.
know what? I for some reason I'm remembering the picture of the teaser of them. I remember them looking kind of more Rook-ish.
Yeah, let me see if I can find a photo. But I'm wondering if it's like they took the tech that made tormentors, and they're like, well, what if instead of Nezarec, info, we
We
just
just use
plug in
yeah,
Rulk info, and
yeah.
this new thing comes out.
Why not?
Yeah. Uh, so I'm wondering if that's going to end up being kind of the origin of
Of
those of
subjugators, which
subjugators.
which would mean that they wouldn't even be an evolution of tormentors. They would just be using that same technology and just creating something else.
Right.
Which again, that's not outside of the possibility of the witness because we
Yeah.
don't know if those are going to exist outside of the portal. If they're going to exist in this reality, like we don't know how the whole going
Yeah.
into the Pale Heart is going to work. Are our enemies going to be pouring out of it? Are we going into it? Now there is the new this week they for the um I can't call it a twid. This week in Destiny, they did show a picture for what's coming in April for the Into the Light. That's going to happen right before Final Shape, the 2 months leading into Final Shape. And in that picture, there is it looks as a view of like just below the tower, of three guardians below the tower with Cabal, Fallen, Hive, all that stuff. but then there are also darkness ships or darkness monoliths or something in the city. So maybe there is stuff that's going to start pouring out. Because again, the witness has been in there for let's see, over a year now.
Right.
Kind of panicking that he's had that much time to just do whatever the hell he wants to do in there. We know that space is like a space that kind of reacts to or has been described as like a space that reacts to the people around it and the thoughts around it. I have no idea what could pour out of that thing. Like whatever's inside the witness's head or
Which
heads
is a scary thought.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what's coming with the Into the Light stuff in April.
Oh, absolutely. And as you're talking about that, I looked up a photo of the subjugators, and they 110%, they could be Rolk's brothers. Like
Oh God,
they
you got
look
the same head and
very
everything.
close. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Okay.
similar.
So I'm betting then that a subjugator is the DNA technology used on Rourke, because again, if Rourke being the first disciple, like for us to have taken that down, that's a huge blow to the witness's ego and like his forces. Like as much as I don't think that the witness totes final shape as being like sword logic-y, right? Like
I don't think so.
I think sword logic is just the hive's interpretation of what the final shape is supposed to be. And so therefore like the whole idea of like anything that dies is supposed to die and shouldn't be resurrected. Everything's supposed to come down to this one finite thing. Like I think there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to learn in Final Shape about how sword logic and the idea of the final shape of like everything whittling down, and even the origins of Destiny Universe. I think we're going to see um, a better understanding of the winnower and the gardener. So yeah, yay, got me excited, get me pumped up. But I have to wait. I have to be patient. I don't like it.
So yeah,
all right.
Say thank you once more for that kind review. Say if you're listening to this and you want to support us in some way, leaving a review of your own is one of the best ways to do that. You can do that on whatever platform you happen to be listening on. If it allows for text reviews and you feel strongly enough to write something out, we love reading those. Or you can connect with us on Twitter at Myths and Stories, via email, mythsandstories@gmail.com. And if you're wondering where you can find older episodes, outside of just like the normal audio platforms, we have stuff going up on YouTube now. So as of the time of this recording, both our Elixni series and our Eris Morn series are in progress as being uploaded up there. So, maybe check them out and leave a comment or whatever there. And you may see yourself as a future shout out.
As long as you're not that same bot that keeps poking our comments. You, Mr. Bot, you can go away. I'll be okay with that. All right. Well, I guess I'll throw a thank you out. I don't really know who to thank anymore. We keep thanking all the people, and I've stopped making people up. Thank God. I don't know. I guess. I don't know. You know what? I'm gonna go big with this one. Thank you, Bungie. Thank you, Bungie, for bringing us this amazing world. This has been an insane journey that we've all been on since D1. Like I remember looking at some of I remember before D1 came out and the concept art for it and the sketches and the ideas for this thing and what it has evolved into from. I mean, I swear I remember looking at those things in like 2012 or 2013 or so, and to see what it has evolved into today. And yeah, I'm excited to see where this thing is going. I know a lot of people look at Final Shape as like the end of Destiny, but I don't know. I think it's the end of an arc, and we'll see where it goes from there. So yeah, thank you, Bungie.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Smith?
I think that's it.
All righty. Well, then, from all of us lore daddies to all of you guardians out there, we'll see you next time.
You found your people. Guardians do love their myths and stories.